Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Rainmaker Stories. I have with me today Naiyya Saggi, co-founder Glamm Group and founder BabyChakra. Naiyya, this is like deja vu for me. Not very long ago, I was interviewing you for the book Awakening the Rainmaker.
I know, Nishta, it's so wonderful to be talking again. And, I think the book has done so well. So congratulations on the success of the book.
And thank you so much, and thank you for being a huge part of it. And I've always enjoyed your command on the subject matter, your worldview, and just your area of business. So I'm looking forward to another interesting conversation for all our listeners out there.
Fab.
Okay, so I'll just start with, talking about your career journey. You started with BabyChakra, an all-inclusive parenting app, and moved on to create this huge house of brands with the Glamm Group. And whenever one hears of house of brands, we think of considerable success that the MNCs have enjoyed, especially in India, the likes of PNG and HUL. So, what is your take on an India led and India focused house of brands? Like, if you could shed some light on the challenges, your vision, and how do you really see this growing into in the next, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. Nishta, I think it's interesting you use the term house of brands. The way we actually define ourselves is a digital first FMCG conglomerate. And I think that's really important to break down into its component pieces, right? So the main thing that sort of differentiates us from most other players out there is that we have in our DNA been digital first and we continue to sort of play on that strength. Right. And I think that's a massive opportunity just in itself, right? Because if you look at today's consumers, of course, we've talked about how many more women are coming online, men are coming online as well. They're deriving inspiration, aspiration from what they consume online by way of their personal care, beauty, intimate hygiene choices, baby care choices, right? So I think the digital first DNA is super critical because as a conglomerate, we've been able to stay ahead of the trends, stay connected very deeply to our consumers and customers, and very very deeply hyper personalized for their needs, both in our product offerings as well as in our conversation and content offerings. Right. So the digital first DNA is super critical. And then we say we're an FMCG conglomerate. And I think that's really important to build out because, we believe that each brand and each company is a market leader. And it is today objectively in its sphere. Right. So My Glam is on the top four. And this year it will be the top three makeup brands in the country. Sirona sells the largest number of menstrual cups in the country. Organic Harvest is the largest certified organic play in the country in terms of clean beauty, etc. And then you, of course, have Momsco and BabyChakra and Saint Botanica, right? So they're all category leaders. So I think that's how we really approach the whole play, staying true to our digital first DNA and really focusing on market leader brands that really are winners in their own categories at large scale.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting take, and you focused a lot on being digital first. And this story, like this line of thought, goes back to the BabyChakra platform as well. You've seen that power of content to community, community to commerce, and you've really created like large outcomes from it. Both has like the Glamm Group and as your portfolio companies have followed that approach. I recently also saw this initiative, this hashtag, the mom initiative that was there, which was like offline community meetups.
Mom's talk.
A mom's talk. They were coming together and just a platform where they could talk, seek each other's, support, advice, and gives a good platform. So, what would be your advice, Vinaya, to content creators out there who, in their individual capacity, or even startups which are coming into this space, how can they monetize on the commerce part of it in parallel to creating an impact? Because I see, especially when I look at your content out there, or the kind of initiatives that you run, of course you're creating something big, but you're also creating impact with it. So how do you balance these two scales?
Nishta, today's consumers are all about purposeful brands.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, and it's not just purpose in the formulations and the way the formulations are developed and what they contain and the whole sort of narrative, like that was quoting in a separate conversation. Nielsen came up with a study that said that today's Indians 40% of today's Indians are looking for clean brands, for sulfate-free brands, for natural brands, right? I mean, that entire dialogue in terms of clean formulations, etc., in the literally the last 4 or 5 years has completely evolved and changed. So they're looking, of course, for like very good formulations and purposeful formulations and clean formulations, but they're also very strongly aligned to brand mission and purpose, and they're looking for purposeful brands as a result as well. And that's been something we've seen play out globally too. I mean, if you look at for instance, how Toms really grew in footwear. If you look at how, for instance, even Nike stands for a purpose of like, let's just do it, and like really celebrating athletes, but also celebrating regular sort of folks who are winners in sport and are taking up a sport and really excelling in it, right? Celebrating excellence. I think that's sort of the cause and the purpose-filled marketing that brands are doing today. Now, of course, for me, coming from BabyChakra, it came a little bit more naturally because BabyChakra was started with a purpose to be in service of mothers, right? It was literally the reason we started and the genesis with which we started. So everything you see play out at BabyChakra comes from that like original purpose. But I think what I'm really proud to say is that even the brands that the Glamm Group owns, right? I think with My Glam, for instance, we're seeing a lot of conversations we're able to facilitate today about positive beauty, right? About celebrating body positivity, celebrating inclusive beauty, for instance. So all of this conversation is what we're facilitating now, right? In Sirona, it's all about creating safe, judgment-free zones for women and any menstruators to have extremely open, transparent conversations on anything to do with sexuality, intimate health, whatever it might be, right? With Organic Harvest, we are basically embracing, of course, the cause of planting 1 million trees by 2024, but 2025, but also equally, celebrating what it is to lead organic, sustainable, more natural lifestyles. So I think every brand that you see play out actually has a purpose already within it. And what you'll see more and more of is that all the activations we do and all the conversations we have, be it offline or be it online, with our overall consumer communities and content communities, will all take on the form of purpose.
Wow, that's actually interesting, Naiyya. And have you seen a shift into, let's say, the investor community, or at times people think of it that these things will not lead to financial targets being met? For instance, they look at it like in the earlier days, people used to look at all these initiatives as more like PR driven, or just related to a day sort of a thing, that okay, we'll, let's say, celebrate the Pride Month, we'll celebrate the Women's Week, and we'll just limit it to that. But now we are seeing more and more brands doing it on a long term basis. It's like, it's what we stand for. So you see that change happening, and this is of course a global trend for a while now. Do you see this coming into India also in a big way?
No, absolutely, we do. If you look at how public markets look at even today's, the reporting of publicly listed companies, right? I mean, there is a very strong element, and people are looking at, how sustainable are you, right? That's already being reported in public documentation. Then, people are looking at, clean practices. Where are you sourcing your materials from, right? So that change has already happened in the way public markets, and I'm about public markets here, that too, right? They're already looking and evaluating companies because that is a hallmark of sustainable growth. So, companies that are already, going back and looking at the environmental impact of their actions, looking at the societal impact of their actions, historically have proven to exceed the public market, numbers, and they've stayed along more for the long term, right? So I think that realization, retail investors and public market investors have already. When we talk about venture capital and we talk about private equity, etc., companies at a certain stage of growth are expected now to stand for something, because I think more than even coming back to like what is good for the planet, what's good for the people, what's good for process, etc., it also creates a very strong competitive differentiation. See, today brands, at the end of the day, products, I would say, could be quite fungible, right? Arguably, what makes a consumer choose one certain brand over another It goes back to the purpose of that brand, right? And whether the consumer feels included in that purpose, in that narrative, and whether the brand speaks to that consumer or not. And if the brand stands for something the consumer also associates with, aligns with, and believes in, finds an affiliation. So I think people are realizing more and more that, there is no way forward than being a purpose-driven brand. But just to caveat, Nishta, it's super critical to be authentic. If you try to plaster purpose on you as a brand when you don't really live, breathe that mission, and your teams don't live, breathe that mission, people are very smart. They can see right through it and they will call you out on it.
Yeah, that's actually such a right thing that you just mentioned. And this leads me to another initiative, which was again led by you, and you were like hugely appreciated for it on LinkedIn too. That hashtag changing the narrative initiative, which started with these 100 women entrepreneurs. You talked about their stories. It was a huge publication in Hindustan Times to for a national daily to give that amount of real estate to this initiative was a great. And especially it was so refreshing to read about these stories when in the past I've come across so many those hashtag manuals, and there have been so many conclaves which have been all male panels and all male people or industry leaders talking about things. So I would love to hear your your side of the story on what led to this, and it just made me proud, yeah, like to see some familiar names also who have been covered in the book, and to see you being thanked for it. I was like, wow, this is just like made me so proud looking at it. So if you could share
Nishka,
about
we
it.
have still such a long way to go. But I'll tell you, since you asked the backstory, right? It was, I think it's a story that a really small, determined, functional, cross-sectoral team can really make a dent, right? I think that is the story ready to be told. And I'll tell you that story. So I was on a call, I do a bunch of very small angel checks. I was on a call with a couple of fellow angel investors, and people were like, yeah, but where are the women? There are hardly any women entrepreneurs. And it made me really angry because, of course, we know so many of them and they're fab and they're building businesses at scale. It's just because they're maybe a little bit more silent or less, show offy that you don't really get to hear their stories out. And of course, there is a problem. There's a systemic problem, like less than 2%. And I think in the US, and less than, I think, 0.8% or some ridiculously low number of venture funding goes to women-led founders. So that number still has to move. But the important thing is that let's at least call out the stories of women who are here, who are building, who are scaling, who are doing amazing things. Because then that, when you see those stories, it inspires the next generation of women and men to know that there could be amazing women who are leaders, right? So I think, so that happened on Monday morning. Then Monday evening, I called up Invest India, Astha, who heads Invest India. I said, Astha, we have to do something about this. Women Entrepreneurship Day is on Saturday. Can we just pull this together? She was like, wait, what do you mean? They're going to put 100 names together? How? We're like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Then I called up SK at Mint. And then he signed on to his credit, and like he completely trusts the process. And I talked internally. I said, can we pull this off? Right. So I got a small team together from the group, Astha's team. And of course, I talked to Abha, who was my partner in this from Ladies Who Lead. And she was amazing because she actually then, got her team together as well. So, together it was like a very cross-functional team, literally put together in 24 hours. And then we opened up nominations to invite women to nominate themselves and men to nominate amazing women they knew. And in, I think, less than 24 hours, we had more than 800 nominations, or some really large number. And then we had to sit and filter through all those nominations. And that's how we came up with that list. And then when the list, the night before the list was going to go live, or no, 48 hours before the list was going to go live, I had, SK and I talked about doing a one-page thing, with like a more of a digital footprint eventually. He called me up and he was like, Naiyya, this is groundbreaking. We're going to give it 4 pages in the Mint. And I think that, gave me goosebumps. And that's what happened. We got 4 pages in the Mint, which is the leading publication, financial publication. But more importantly, Nishta, what happened after? After that, what happened was that WhatsApp groups opened up to, actively scout for those women entrepreneurs who were featured. The entrepreneur groups that we probably were not part of, all of the women in those groups became part of those groups, right? So the informal networks opened up. The large D2C WhatsApp groups again and communities basically said we need a women's chapter because there's so many amazing women, and let them also like come together and support each other. And as men, we will work closer with them. We had Piyush Goyal sort of talk about this list. We had Alia Bhatt tweet this list, right? So there was a very strong, and of course, more importantly, there were mails coming in and notes coming in and posts being put of, men and women showing these lists to their daughters and to their sons, right? And saying, this is what you could be. So I do think, I mean, it definitely helped to a large extent. And even today, when there's a manual, people actually share the link to this list and say, are you kidding me? This list exists. You have 100 women to choose from. You can't choose one. So I think there is definitely some change this has brought about. Long way to go. But like, it's been one of my proudest moments in the last year, I think, to have been part of the team that had that change happen.
Yeah, that was actually just brilliant. And even when I talked about when I read some familiar names on it,
Yeah.
and you mentioned about Astha, she's my batchmate from my grad college in West India.
And she's fab.
Yeah, so I was like, wow, like through the book, I've been connected to so many women, and through the women who are a part of the book, then more women. It's like that compounding effect that takes into place, and it's so great when you mentioned about these women being opened into those networking channels, or people starting to reach out to them. It's just a door opener sort of a thing. It actually just when there is one of you at the top, you see so many opportunities opening up for others as well. And it's so important for more of us to be vocal about these things. So actually, just kudos on that successful initiative, Neha. And this leads me to the last question for our interaction. So I also read that the BabyChakra and the Glamm Group merger made it to the Harvard Business School case study. And you've talked about, how to manage those crossroads as a professional, as an entrepreneur. So some thoughts on practical hacks around when, as a professional or as an entrepreneur, you're faced with that crossroad in your professional journey.
I don't have the perfect answer for it, but here's how I approach being at a crossroads, right? I think with time comes a feeling of intuition and gut. You don't get it immediately early on in your career, but later you sort of start feeling that this could be the right path, because you could run all the numbers in the world, you could run all the analytics in the world, but an Excel model or a model is exactly what you want to make of it, right? I mean, we all know that all too well, right? All the assumptions that go in basically guide the model. So I think at a certain point in time, when you're making a very critical business call, here's how I approach it, right? One is I do obviously have a bunch of conversations trying to understand different perspectives, but then I take some time out by myself. I sit alone and I actually filter and process that information and what it could mean for my stakeholders. And I start with that perspective, right? Laying out sort of cases in my head, like, okay, what could be the base case, best case, worst case for my stakeholders that are my team, my investors, my customers, and then of course me. So that's the starting point of making a decision. Then it kind of moves on to also having a sense of when you're negotiating with another party, right? What is the comfort level you have with the other party, right? Do you feel like you could actually get into a partnership with them? And I tell this a lot to entrepreneurs who are negotiating term sheets, right? Because that is probably the trickiest part of your relationship in the early days, right? And therefore, the respect with which the other party is approaching the term sheet negotiation, please watch out for very carefully, because it will give you a sense of what can happen when things get tricky in future. And I have to call this out, right? I think Darpan was extremely respectful when we were doing this conversation, right? In terms of my roles, responsibilities going forward, what would mean for my shareholders, what would mean for me and my team financially, etc. So I think that gave me a lot of comfort in terms of this is, at this tricky point in time, we're having a really healthy, good, engaged conversation. This could be the future. And I think the third thing is, take it in baby steps. Don't try and predict what's going to happen 5 years from now, because no one knows, right? So basically look ahead and say, okay, in the next, 1 year, is this something that I sustainably see for myself, as the right answer? And if it feels right, then go for it. Don't let it stop you, and don't get into this whole, analysis paralysis, because then you won't move. So, take a judgment call, go with it. And also, use your intuition of people that all of us have cultivated over the years to inform some of that decision making.
Yeah, wow. Kudos to this, Naiyya, and I'm sure this piece of advice is going to be very helpful for our listeners and people who are actually, which each one of us do at some point in time, professionally as entrepreneurs or when you're in a job faced with the crossroad. So now we are done with the serious part of the conversation, and this has been like totally fun and a lot of insights as usual whenever I have a chat with you. And we'll move on to a fun quick rapid fire now. This is going to be like, what, 2-3 minutes. So I hope you're all like pepped up with like good punchy answers.
Sure, sure, Nishta.
Okay, cool. So we'll start with the first one. What compliment do people give you the most?
That I have a really great positive energy.
Yeah, I feel it too. That's like
Okay, good to know.
totally relate. Yeah. What code do you live by or you try to live by?
Carpe diem.
What is one of your weird quirks?
Um, I drink a lot of coffee. I don't think it's a weird quirk. I think everybody is in the same boat as me, but I drink a lot of coffee, like literally 10, 12 cups a day, which is not good.
Oh, wow. That can be a New Year resolution then to like,
Potentially. Well, I'm drinking coffee as we speak in the new year.
okay. Okay. Then, what is the first thing you notice about someone when you meet them the first time?
I think just their energy and their humility. I find it very inspiring when someone's super successful and super humble.
And if you were to spend a day in someone else's shoes, whose would they be and why?
Mm, I'd probably um I'd probably have chosen Bill Gates because I just think it's interesting. He has this. I mean, of course, there's been a bunch of controversy recently, but till a few years back, I think his whole this aggressive capitalist onto becoming this savior of the world persona, and he's done some amazing work with the Gates Foundation,
Yeah.
right? I think it's an interesting dichotomy, and I would love to see how he approaches his decision making on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, that's an interesting choice, actually. So this draws us to the end of the conversation. Thank you so much, Naiyya, for taking out the time.
Thanks, Nisha. It's been my pleasure, and congrats again on awakening the Rainmaker.
Thank you so much.